I always stated next year I'll go get my high school diploma. And I kept saying it for years.
Growing up, I was under the impression that getting a GED was, a mark of failure.
I don't believe in lost causes. I believe that everyone has the potential to move above where they're at in life.
You never know what you can do, what you can accomplish.
Impossible is only impossible if you don't try.
This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen. A public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
There are now more than a dozen other nations that have higher high school graduation rates than the United States. The problem is that we don't really know what the cost to America is of failing to educate large numbers of students, but it's really risky.
Individually, the data is just overwhelming that education is correlated with access to better jobs and higher earnings, higher income, lower unemployment rates, happiness, more health, higher marriages. So, education is our preparation for adulthood.
By the time I was in 8th grade, I had just witnessed a lot of very negative things in my household, just a lot of alcohol abuse, a lot of issues with my family. I ended up deciding to drop out of school for the first time. And that first time that I dropped out, I went looking for a job and found a job as a gardener pushing lawnmowers.
I dropped out of high school in the second semester of the 10th grade and thought that was a cool thing to do. As a young man growing up in the housing projects, full of poverty, hopelessness, and despair, what I saw primarily were street guys and street folks, and who were kind of isolated from mainstream society. And I didn't have the ambition of being a doctor, lawyer, accountant, or school teacher of any profession, because that's not what I saw.
The average age of the adult that we're serving is 31. These are individuals who are young enough to get their high school credential and get additional skills and go into the workforce and contribute to society in a very meaningful way.
There are 2 million jobs today that are begging. They're going begging. These are jobs that are open, that people can fill, but aren't being filled because we don't have a skilled workforce. That's a drag on the economy. When people don't have the jobs to fill, they're not earning paychecks, they're not shopping, they're not going to restaurants, they're not buying homes, they're not doing all of the other things that fuel economic growth.
We need to find ways to address the needs of people from every segment of the population, because their children are going to be folks we need to rely on too. When my generation is retired, and many in my generation have not saved enough for retirement, are going to be relying on the public sector. We need as many productive citizens paying taxes as we can get, and not more young people who are also relying on public assistance. This is a fundamental turning point almost for the society with regard to whether we are going to have the productivity that we're going to need to support the population mix that we're going to have over the next 25, 50, 75 years.
I worked every day possible, as many jobs as I could possibly work, because I was trying to provide for a family. I was a young man, and it was real hard at the time. I was a great athlete. I was also a great student. I I've had straight A's my entire time in school. It was just outside noise that prevented me from succeeding.
I went to the second grade because my parents were, well, they signed us up to home educate, but we were never actually home educated. I was just getting any job I could get that would hire people that didn't have a high school or equivalency diploma. I was working 3 jobs because I had to be able to survive. I had apartment rent, I had a car payment, all of my utilities, just daily living expenses. 3 jobs is what I had to work to basically survive.
Wages at the low end of the distribution in the United States have really gone down in real terms. So the economic disadvantage of not finishing high school has actually grown in the last 20 or 30 years, and it's quite sizable. I mean, some estimates put it at roughly $500,000 over their lifetime.
Over time, I became employed. And I'm a young mother, I have a child, I needed security. So I took a job. And then you didn't have to worry about having a high school diploma. No one asked you. They needed a position filled. And you qualified, you had the job. So basically, long story short, that's how it's always been for me for years.
Economically, high school dropouts are more than, on average, twice as likely not to have a job. What does that mean for unemployment checks, subsidized housing, the healthcare system? Half of the incarcerated population is thought to be a high school dropout. When you offer them educational classes, they are way more likely not to commit a crime again, 40% less likely to commit a crime again. That's unbelievable when you look at the soaring costs of incarceration in the US.
When you're behind those doors, you have time to think about all the wrongs that you've done and what can you do to change, And you come up with the answer, am I gonna do the same thing when I get out, what is it gonna take? And I mean, you need that opportunity. You need someone to come in and help you try to get back within society and, do what's right.
And there were all these different things, right? And then I started thinking, you know what? The most important cost of all is the cost of what might have been, and that can't be measured. How do you measure what someone could have been had they lived up to their potential, right? It's all these things that are just out of reach. It's a business not started, a song not written, a bedtime story never read. And to me, that was heartbreaking, that it was there. It could have been. It just wasn't.
What are your numbers like today?
We have 33 kids today.
Okay, how many you got in court?
One out so far. We had big day.
My name is Hasan Davis. I live in Berea, Kentucky. Hey, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. Yourself?
Pretty good.
Good. How y'all doing today?
Good.
Young people are a real special focus of mine. The work that I have done my whole adult life is working with high-risk youth. And so what I want you to understand is that this is your opportunity to figure out how you move forward, or you give us permission to keep holding you back, because we're good at that, right? I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. I started in a pretty stable family that by the time I was 6 started to disintegrate. My sister and I walked in on my father, straddled my mom on the couch, choking her, his hands around her neck, and things fell apart. Police came and took him away in handcuffs. Shortly after that, they separated, then divorced. My mother worked several jobs, and we began to go on and off the food stamp rolls, and so life got a bit of a challenge then. In my early life, was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia fairly young. In kindergarten, they started locking me in the code room because I was one of those kids that was never going to be anybody. And I bounced around from school to school, had 5 different elementary schools over my elementary career. We moved from St. Louis to Atlanta after my 3rd grade year. And after an arrest at 11 years old and moving further into delinquency, my mother enrolled me in an alternative school. And it was a very unique school. There were kids like me who struggled and had lots of challenges, and then there were gifted and talented kids who struggled and had lots of challenges because they weren't being challenged enough in other schools too. But the administrator of this school was the most unique piece, Dr. Lorraine Wilson. She called me to her office one day, and it was one of those moments for me that was kind of usual. You know, you come to the office and you get the, I'm just waiting for you to screw up so I can kick you out of here. And I'm always like, well, we could probably get that done by lunchtime and get everybody back on schedule because I know the routine. So I sat there and she said, you know, I know who you are. And I think you can accomplish anything you set your mind to, and all you can do is prove me wrong. And I sat there for a second. So I said, you know I'm Hasan, right? And she said, I know who you are, Hasan, and I think you can accomplish anything you set your mind to, and all you can do is make me a fool for believing such a thing. And for the first time in my educational career, someone told me that I was already great and dared me to give up great for something less than that. My mother did the same thing when she picked me up from the police station at 11 and told me that if I could just see what she saw, then I would know. And so the two of them together kind of gave me this counter image of myself as a backdrop to whatever the rest of the world was giving me, as a monster, as a thug, as stupid, as useless, as all of these labels that had kind of built up. Full disclosure, I got expelled from that school. But because Dr. Lorraine Wilson and my mother, Alice Lovelace, continued to paint this really broad vision of who I could be and dared me to reach for it. After I got expelled, I said, you know, I'm gonna get my GED. And then after I got my GED, I said, you know what? I can do college. You know, with a 1.67 GPA and ADHD and dyslexia and expulsion from alternative school. But Dr. Lorraine Wilson and my mama, Alice Lovelace, said that I could do it. And so who am I to turn down that kind of courage? And so it gave me the courage to seek out a place called Berea College here in Kentucky. I got accepted into Berea and decided that it was time to try something different. Came to Kentucky sight unseen. I'd never been here, never been to a small town like that. And so all of my greatest fears were riding with me. I spent my whole first year feeling like an imposter, feeling like eventually somebody was going to notice that I wasn't supposed to be there and call the college police and report me. You know, I was in remedial English and math the entire first year of college. I felt like I was completely unprepared, but I was there. Truth is, and I like to be very honest, I got expelled from Berea twice. That's a really difficult thing sometimes, I think, for young people. But for me, there wasn't a plan B. There was not a go back home and hit the streets, and because I knew what the outcome would be from that. You know, and truth is, my brothers Derek and Sean are both doing life sentences now. And as often as I've thought about how good it would have been for me to be there, maybe I could have changed it, the reality is, more likely than not, I would be with them or I would be dead like my 5 cousins. And I went back to Berea and actually graduated from Berea after my third time back. And when I graduated, I was president of the student body. I was homecoming king. I was voted unanimously by the vice presidents to go to DC and lobby Congress for work-study college funding. And as I stood up at graduation to give the opening welcome and prayer, my mother was walking down the aisle of the auditorium to take her seat. And in that moment, I finally saw the man she'd been looking at since she picked me up from the police station, where she told me that I was great and that if I could finally see that, then I would finally be able to own it. We have to work at it. I got expelled from every school I ever attended, diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia, grew up on food stamps and the whole 9 yards. And there are lots of folks who say, Hasan, well, you know, you should probably leave that stuff out about the GED and about the arrest and about the being expelled because, you know, nobody would ever know that about you and you're so successful now and it just really, you know, it creates questions. And I'm like, well, it should, you know. And the question that I hope it creates is, if these are things that are possible, then who have I been refusing to allow through the door that could do this? Because I assume things about them. You know, who out there could be the next commissioner or the next secretary or the next governor that I've been self-selecting out for their own good because people like that really can't pull it? And so I try to be unabashed when I let people know that I am a GED student and more.
This program is part of American Graduate. Let's make it happen. A public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.